So can I put it over here?
Yeah, that's fine. Start it with a moment of silent prayer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Johnson? Here. Victor Cicero? Yes, Nancy Sherlock here. Ted Parker will not be able to make it this evening. He's at work, and I actually haven't heard from the others too. So we'll move on. We'll start right with the hearing of the public. Just let the public know that the public comment on this on potential use for the pool site. Ideas for use must include cost, funding sources, management plan, timeline, and address the impacts of the activity on the park and the community, both positive and negative. So I know that Wayne is here to give us a presentation. He's going to abbreviate it from the last time, but at this time I'd like anyone else who wants to come forward to please come forward. Jane, do you want to speak?
Jane Berger, 90 West Maple Avenue. Good evening. I was pleased to see that there's a meeting this evening to gather input and also to hear again Wayne's presentation. I regret I was unable to hear it the first time. Hearing that might be helpful for some of the comments. I understand it's supposed to be a community garden. And the question is if that plan is not to take the entire pool property. Hopefully that would be a concern. The other thing is we have a wonderful baseball league. They do occupy a large area of the park, so I truly hope there will be no plan to expand baseball into the pool area. General comments. Then one concern, since this is the first really meeting with the public to hear ideas, I gasped a little bit that anyone coming to this first meeting was to have the cost, funding source, et cetera, is listed in the public notice. So from the 27th to tonight, that's not a lot of time for someone to put together a full-fledged plan. If you're looking for ideas to see one, if it's worth pursuing further or not. So I don't have all that cost information, but I am going to share thoughts that I think we all know, but I don't recall that it's ever been formally stated. Given the economics and change of use, we are not going to be rebuilding a pool on this site. I'm not sure that's been definitively said, and I will put that out there, and I think what I've heard about plans is there are no plans to build a pool. It's not only a factor of cost, which would be exorbitant, the pool would not be able to sustain the cost of rebuilding as well as regular operating costs for the number of individuals, primarily hopefully from the borough, that would be using it. So not to build a pool there is something that I would agree with. Its time has passed in a community like the borough. I would hope if there's someone that had any ideas to throw out for consideration that doesn't have all of the back of the full-blown proposal, you would give them a few minutes. There may not be anyone else. There's ideas for splash parks, there's community gardens, and I think park-like setting down there, and the building. I understand it's structurally sound. There are bathrooms there that may need some renovative work, but certainly would be of a lesser cost rather than building all new restroom facilities there. And at that end of the park, there certainly is a new need for restrooms. with the building there. There is a room there that would have filtration if you did some type of a water activity there. And the gated area, it's fenced in, so if there are activities that needed to have some type of security to maintain whatever equipment or whatever activities may be going on there. So I think there are some things that can be maintained. There is that small concession stand that could be used by the borough. Remember when MEAC or when you have the Arts and Park festivities, that concession stand could be available for those events. There's the old concession stand nearby. I understand it's pretty much used by baseball, and they don't gleefully welcome that being used by other groups. So those are my thoughts and comments for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak this evening? Okay.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Wayne Cashers at 35 Crown Street. Earlier this month, I gave a presentation to town with some members of the public here, so I'm happy to make a bridged version of that, so I won't take your time. This is a current image of the pool location.
Can everyone hear him in the back?
No.
Can you talk a little louder?
Sure.
Jump
What
over
I'm
the mic.
proposing,
Come over here.
It's on. I don't know.
I can move the show.
Wireless mic. People can move up too if you can't hear, just move up.
It's not on, the microphone.
Okay, does this help?
Yeah. The microphone's not on. There's no power to it.
I'll try and speak as loudly as I can.
Wait, can you turn that a bit so council can see it?
Sure.
Thank you.
What I'm proposing is to reuse, the pool space for community gardens. And this is not the idea of a community farm. These are more a combination of two gardens. One is a botanical garden, the other is a raised bed garden for members of the community to participate in. I'm going to read a very brief statement. Be the easiest way for all of us to deal with this tonight. I'm here to propose a project whose goal is to convert the defunct and dilapidated community pool site in Williamson Park into a unique community space. The Community Gardens of Morrisville proposal suggests that the former pool site should make an excellent location as a home to a new botanical garden and community garden. These gardens will showcase native Pennsylvania flowering plants and become a new community gathering space that includes opportunities for families to participate in raised bed gardening. In addition to standard raised beds, the gardens will provide specially designed beds to accommodate specific needs of individuals in the community who have various physical disabilities and make ordinary gardening difficult. These include people with mobility challenges as well as some of the elderly who have difficulty working garden on their own today. The plan includes teaching beds for our young students and beds dedicated to providing fresh foods to our neighbors in need. Monthly gardening workshops are planned. A welcoming environment will be created that includes park benches for visitors to enjoy a relaxing break in the shade, rest among the flowering plants, a mini escape by the small water garden and fountain. The gardens will offer opportunities for everyone in our community to participate. Studies have shown that community gardens can reliably improve social cohesion within communities that host them. Their presence has been shown to reduce crime and increase nearby property values. Unique gardens are known to attract visitors who may patronize our local businesses, and this is something that they will particularly welcome. The uniqueness of the Morrisville Gardens is in combining two garden mottos: a botanical garden complete with planting labels and links to detailed plant information accessible by your smartphones, and a community garden where residents can grow and harvest fruits, flowers, and vegetables. A verdant space like this will produce a one-of-a-kind attraction in our region and complement other features within the borough. We have Somerset, we have other historic points of interest, and this will just tie in with those. The gardens have received enthusiastic support from several Morrisville residents that I have spoken to. And already, many are eager to begin gardening with their neighbors, as well as donate samples of native plants from personal collections in their home gardens. Importantly, the project has received overwhelming support from local owner-operated businesses, many of whom have pledged material support once the project is approved. And I have a petition with 19 owner-operated businesses, business owners, that they've signed and marked as pledges. It's important to point out that this project is one that poses little risk to our community, the members, and visitors. Startup and operational costs are very small. By reusing the certain buildings and concrete patio areas left behind when the pool was abandoned, no major construction costs will be incurred. Additionally, the garden project will be primarily self-funded by leasing of nearly 50 garden beds, and that's up to 50. This is a scalable project. It doesn't all have to be thrown in there at once. And by applying for future grant subsidies available from state, county agencies, and horticultural societies. For more information, there's a website up here. It's very difficult to read from back there, I'm sorry. But it's morrisvillegardens.wordpress.com, where the detailed proposal that I prepared and other documents supporting this project are posted. Organizers can be contacted through the website by people interested in joining the garden or simply offering suggestions. This project is about community building. When these gardens mature, Morrisville residents will have another point of pride to share within the borough and with future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And if I could just take one more minute and just describe a little bit of what's on this image here. This is a fairly close representation of the existing pool site. By preserving the cement decking around the pool as much as we can, this will enable the mobility challenged, a very stable platform to work on. I've spoken with teachers at the Bucks County Technical High School in the shop classes there, who have asked me to come back in September, represent this, because one of the horticultural teachers has just retired, so they want to introduce it to the new people. But they've offered assistance in designing and building these raised garden beds for the handicapped. Some of these include raising them up high enough that a wheelchair can get under them. They're narrower than normal garden beds to make the reach available. Out here, and the configuration can change. These are more standard sized beds. We're proposing a lot of native flowering plants, water collection, rain collection stations, and water banks, so that we don't have to rely on utility provided water. And the wading pool, which seems to be in pretty fair shape there, we think that could be lined and used to present native flowering water plants for Pennsylvania. These green things, picnic benches, park benches, because we want this to be an open and inviting area. People can come, relax, sit. If you want to garden, you can garden. There's going to be volunteer opportunities. We just want to make it very inclusive and very open. So, thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you.
Could you repeat the website again?
Oh, certainly. It's Morrisville.
Okay.
Gardens, that's plural. .wordpress, WORDPRESS.com.
Thank you.
Sure. Sure.
It's cool that it's cool that you're using the hole. You're using the pool basically. But the raised beds only need to be 1.5 or 2 feet deep to grow even tomatoes, or something like that. So is there going to be any utilization of the space underneath?
Well, regarding
No, you don't need. How deep is the pool?
No, that I understand.
Deep then.
My understanding is that council has somewhat committed to having this pool filled in.
That's correct.
Okay, so that this would be filled in level to the deck.
Oh.
Okay, This would be the most easily accessible area for people with wheelchairs or other mobility difficulties. Teaching beds would also go in here, you know, the ones for the students. And ornamental flowers, you know, whatever we can do to, you know, to beautify the area in that space as well. So that pool would be filled up to the deck level, and then we would utilize the deck as a stable platform for mobility. Beyond that space, it becomes a slight slope, grassy
That's
field.
all really good. I would just say that the only thing I think I can add is that there's a real opportunity, since there is a hole there, to provide educational opportunities, whether they might be mushrooms to grow in a dark place, or a clear, transparent enclosure that would show the rooting of trees. I mean, it could be a real educational opportunity that's enabled by the fact that there is kind of a hole there that's being used.
I'm going to record your note when I sit down, but I'd encourage you to go to the website, and because I've actually gotten a couple.
You know how the sharks are behind the foot of glass.
Sure.
You know what I mean? You
Like an ant farm.
Could be a little
Ant farm,
science
soil
experiment. Yeah, ant farm, worm.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of teaching opportunities, and we had a couple of Penn State certified master gardeners, residents of the borough, who have basically signed on to this idea, and they're going to consult with planting of the native plants, you know, make sure that we have things in the right space.
Yeah.
And they've also volunteered time to come on weekends, you know, once a month, or however we can schedule it, to provide workshops to, you know, resident gardeners and other people. So the idea behind those workshops would be that if you're a resident of Morrisville, come, you're free to enjoy it. And if you're from outside of Morrisville, pay some small fee, you know, and it would help sustain the garden. Sir?
That does look nice. Small question. One is the fountain. What size or type fountains are you talking about now?
Something that's basically just very small to help aerate the water and keep it cool. You know,
Yes.
thinking like a solar power, you know, they're relatively inexpensive.
Yeah.
$50 to $70 maybe, something like
I
that.
didn't know if you're looking at like a.
No, not like a statue.
Okay.
No. This is just something that low key. It's partially shaded with trees there. Figure surrounded with some benches. You know, be just a nice place to sit.
It's like a two-part question with this. That you're looking at putting in rain collection, like cisterns, things like that. You're looking at putting in for like cisterns. You're putting in.
For
Yes, rain collection. You're gonna put in.
oh yes,
Cisterns off the gutters. Off
these
the
would
buildings
be
and all?
typically repurposed. The blue barrels, you know,
Yes.
those 50-gallon barrels.
Okay.
I've been doing a little bit of research on how to bank them so that they vent properly and they'll flow properly. So get a nice good water pressure from a collection of these
Right.
barrels tied together to reach the stretches.
All right. With that though, pest control with mosquitoes in your standing water, and also people are investing money and time into the gardens. What's being put up to keep pests out, rodents? Look at that. They're out there watching it.
Now, currently, there's a 6-foot fence that surrounds the park.
Right.
Okay. Todd Sanford had suggested to me that we can extend that fence a little bit higher in case we have a deer problem. We can also take some fencing and dig it down below into the ground to keep, you know, deter some of the groundhogs, that kind of thing, and put a thinner mesh fence to kind of isolate rabbits and,
That's what
you
I'm
know,
saying.
whatever else might
Mice,
squeeze through the
That's
site.
like the rats, chipmunks, things that get in there, squirrels, they can, so there has to be a thought process for the pests and stuff like
And
that.
that's something that gardeners face.
Mosquito thing, it should be.
You know, the idea behind other pest control
Right.
is, you know, the rain barrel collections, they can be sealed with screening, you know, to prevent most mosquitoes from getting down into there, okay? Any pesticide use or, you know, other pest deterrents, we want to make this an organic garden because there's children down there, you know, we don't want harmful chemicals, you know, being sprayed and things like that. So anything anybody would use outside of ladybugs, you know, or
That's the thing.
fingers.
You can can buy like praying mantis, I do mine all the
Praying
time.
mantis, yeah, there's a host of,
And you're putting in like a grass area with the water plants. It's hard to keep frogs there, toads and things like that. The toad houses are pretty popular.
Mm.
So- But mosquitoes, we have a bad problem as it is back there anyway, so attention to the mosquito issue.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. Sir,
We could put a couple bat houses in.
that house is.
Bat house would be great, I think that'd be part of the, you know,
Yeah.
nature center motif.
Especially now that they've taken such a hit, that
Yeah,
providing any additional,
which
space
is
would
helpful,
be
I think,
advantageous.
Dave, I was saying, maybe the audience would like to know what you're going to do with the outbuildings. How you utilize them?
Oh, well, the breezeway here, for lack of a better term, I thought that would be pretty easily repurposed into you know, the second rain collection surface, okay? These other buildings, I think this may have been a concession stand, the small one on the east side. You know, these can be just used for storage. The amount of equipment that's going to be down here for gardens use is really minimal. It's, you know, rakes, shovels, you know, a wheelbarrow, that kind of thing. We're not going to have standing mounds of mulch and stuff like that, you know. When it first gets delivered, mix it, fill the beds as they're completed, and, you know, by the time that process is done, the second season rolls along, and we're really just amending what's in those boxes already.
Like compost. Here with compost.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, I actually have a marking up here
Okay.
for a stage of compost.
Perfect.
Been a little hesitant to talk too much about it because sometimes people are pretty aggressive getting rid of certain waste materials, and it can attract pests.
Yeah.
So I was going to say only leaves and grass clippings for the time being until we get our certified gardeners in to give a class and, you know, teach us how to do this properly, you know, and then once we get it going and we know things are cooking, you know, at a proper temperature and converting, that, you know, we should go ahead.
Just like fruit, vegetable waste, they should be generally like decent stuff
Yeah.
in the garden.
Should be a vegan pile, basically.
James?
Yeah, the community garden section is basically over what was the old racing pool. I know that it was filled in and it probably
Okay.
wasn't with the best soil, whatever. So with this configuration, will you just, you need some type of good garden soil, as a,
Yes.
maybe with 6 inches, 8 or whatever, just plaster down, and that would just be over and then you'd be marked out, or
These
so
are
there's
actually
walkways in between, that would be grass planted, or
grass
Easy
or wood
easy
chips.
maintenance, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
something that we can either, you know, and maybe wider than these, you know, these may be configured differently to fit in more ornamentals, you know, whatever, you know, everybody's got an idea for. These are raised beds, so they're going to be basically box containers.
Okay, yeah, I said this. So
Okay,
that-
and
that
then they'll
makes
be,
it-
they'll be
That makes
filled
it
with-
easier where you would put your good soil.
Exactly.
Anything to keep costs down.
And, you know, and cost, like I said, it was inexpensive, okay? If we had approval, and if we had a list of 50 people who wanted to, you know, lease these beds, we're talking about a startup of between $4,500 and $6,000. And then that's pretty much it. It's self-funding the following year, you know, that would be the building materials and the soils and mushroom compost and the leaf compost to fill those beds. So it's a very inexpensive endeavor,
Right.
you know.
And the area for the raised garden, the ADA gardens, that have to show the trees there. So I mean, we call from now, as you said, it slopes a little bit, that would be kind of a passive area for that would still be grass, kind of like it is now, because it's amongst the trees.
This area here?
No, come down. Move your finger towards you, there.
Oh, yes.
That tree there.
Under these trees, an ideal place for additional benches, and, you know, seating area, that kind of thing. So there's going to be a lot, well, if I have my way, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people to come down and relax.
And you mentioned there would be I think a master gardener working with them. It's always great to play and plant. So with the supervision, I'm sure you'd be making sure there'd be some provisions that whoever is leasing those doesn't want them turned to weeds, and then at the end of the season, there's a way to get rid of them.
There's, in the detailed proposal that was provided a couple of weeks ago, it's online, okay? There's a master gardener from UCLA, and in 2000, 2001, she basically wrote a startup how-to guide, okay? It's like a step-by-step guide that has been adopted by nearly every community garden across the country. It's the one plan that's promoted by the American Community Garden Association. Okay? With that, I've collected several agreements that people who would lease these spaces, you know, there's one from Penn State, there's one from UCLA, there's a couple from Michigan, you know, other popular places. And I thought that, you know, once some sort of a committee was formed, that they could sit down with these sample agreements and figure out, you know, basically what works for Morrisville, you know, and put together an agreement that way. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Do you know anything about the quality of the grass that's in the, you know, the raised bed area right now?
In what way?
Is there anywhere in Morrisville that needs sod? I mean, you could possibly just take the sod off and sell it. Or
That's possible, because we would have to lift that.
taking the sod off might be of value to somebody. Have a fundraiser at the beginning of the season, sell some sod. Yard sales.
Because we will have some grass to,
And
to do something.
does anybody know how much council would save if the pool were not filled with concrete? I mean,
Well,
in
the
terms
pool
of,
would not be filled with concrete, the pool would be filled with clean fill.
okay, and that'd be almost no cost.
I don't know what the cost is, except to have it delivered from Lawrence, New Jersey. 25 yards is about, I think it was like $600, to
Okay,
have
that's
25
not
yards
bad.
delivered. So
Is that the volume of the pool? Or no, the pool's bigger than that?
No, the pool's bigger than
A
that.
couple hundred?
I don't have access
Okay.
to those grounds, so
It's a couple
I
$1,000
haven't
to
been
fill
able
the pool.
to really measure those out.
Okay. You know the dimensions though.
Of the pool,
We can figure it out,
I
right?
can approximate it.
It'd be interesting to figure out because.
I wasn't counting on incurring those costs though, because I read in the paper
Right.
that, that the borough had decided to fill this pool in, and I just thought, well, gee, let me offer a suggestion before the buildings and the pads and everything else gets dumped in.
Does council have any specific concerns that would need to be addressed in order to feel comfortable with not filling the pool? I mean, what, is it a trip and fall hazard, or is there any?
You're looking at a liability.
You can only
Liability,
talk
right,
about
yeah,
it, but we voted in April to fill the pool.
Oh, okay. That's,
Just haven't done it yet because the question came about, what are we gonna do with the buildings? Because the original plan was to use those buildings to fill the pool in. If you put the concrete or the cinder block in the pool, and then, you know, after percolating the bottom, and then also dirt, obviously that cuts down on the cost. But now the thought is that we're gonna keep the buildings, so.
yeah,
now
how much
we're
would
looking
it,
just
well, how
at
much would
dirt.
it, do you know roughly how much the demolition would cost in order to get that filled? You know, I mean, what are the, I'm just trying to figure out what
Well, I think we
the
might be able
trade-offs.
to do that in-house, I can't really say, but if we're trying to preserve the concrete around the pool, it becomes a little bit trickier than just throwing a backhoe in there. We have to really be careful about it. You know, I went down there and it's not as, the concrete down there is not as pristine as it should be. There's an awful lot of, it would have to be worked because there's a lot of highs and lows and.
Certainly. Yeah, the 4,000, I'm sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, I was just gonna say either completely replace it or, you know, have to put filling in, I mean, to make it level, because there are a lot of deep spots and highs and lows.
There's the $4,500 number, that was kind of like the bare bones, you know, and I kind of stretched it up to 6, figuring that there's a lot that I haven't seen and is probably going to need to be covered. So, you know, that
Still
was
minimal.
certainly, sorry?
It's still minimal.
That was my thought.
Can I add something? I've actually observed the deck. I think it's close to pristine shape. I don't
You
think
think?
there are a lot of highs and lows. If that were my patio, I certainly wouldn't put down a new patio. I would have it just repaired, and they're very minor repairs. I have pictures of it. There's only 1 or 2 points where there's any severe damage, and they're very small points.
Well, it's not the damage, it's the separations, the higher you up.
I didn't notice any separations,
There's
and
some.
the,
Just
well,
have to be very
it
careful.
hasn't deteriorated since the time it was a pool. It hasn't really severely deteriorated at all. So if there were different levels, then people would have been tripping on them when it was a pool. I think it's an excellent pad, and needs very little repair to keep it useful for the handicapped. I was surprised, actually.
One thing that the public should know, first of all, I'm Bill Setzer, I'm the chairperson of the EAC in Morrisville this year. And we've seen Wayne's presentation twice before, and this is an abbreviated presentation. You can see a lot more detail if you visit his website. It's just unbelievable how much detail and planning is already put into this. But one thing is that you need to know about filling in this pool. The bottom needs to be jackhammered so you don't collect water. That would be an issue if you didn't fill it in. How do you deal with the fact that it's holding water to some extent?
Yeah.
So the plan is to jackhammer the bottom, fill it in with dirt, that way you don't ever have a swamp there, and keep the pad so people, not just the handicap, but if you do have monthly or weekly presentations to the public from master gardeners or bat fanciers or whatever, that it's a great place to stand.
It could be a bat cave under the raised beds. But,
Well, that's, you're getting into some serious construction
Bill,
and drainage.
if you change the subsurface by filling in the pool, wouldn't that affect the pad?
What subsurface are you changing?
Putting something in the pool, you're filling it in, and changing,
Well, would that be the same as if you had the weight of the water holding that
yeah,
down?
but there's no water right now, we're talking about.
I think it would stabilize the pad, frankly.
Yeah,
I think
probably.
so too. Because right now you have nothing in there but a little bit of water holding
Yeah,
that.
so eventually the sides are gonna collapse.
There is no bottom, so you're not actually putting anything in the pool, you smell out.
Just going into the ground.
Yeah, I think it would stabilize the pad rather than.
so that would be like the footing almost.
I just created, possibly, with these little colorful
Okay.
spots, but, throughout, this, like you mentioned, there's a very short time to really pull a lot of things together, so this drawing is just an idea, illustrating what can go in there.
I like
what
the idea of
features.
Pennsylvania botanicals.
Be very unique.
Wayne, there's a question back there in the green chair.
I may be to give you some advice. I filled in a pool without taking the cement work out. And the big issue is I did it in the fall, and we let it sink all winter, the fall freeze thing, and then we leveled it out, and we had wonderful flat surface. But it was done early enough so that the ground,
It's time to settle.
yes, and we kind of, it costs us some money, but people who are digging pools want to get rid of dirt. And so they're getting charged, and you're getting charged, so you can get a better rate if you get charged less, because it's reciprocal. And there was absolutely, in how many years I had it built was with no significant changes whatsoever. It isn't big like that pool, but it was a 16 by 32 pool.
Basically held down that shell.
Right.
Did you break up the bottom of the pool? Did they do it all
We did
before?
some working up so drainage
Okay,
would take
drainage,
place.
the same thing?
And the thing was to overfill with the soil.
Right.
And then let it have the freeze thaw.
Right.
And I was amazed because it was a big decision, and it was sort of, for us, it was a, and it was amazing.
Did you have this done on your property, a pool? You had
And
an
it was when I lived in New Jersey in Metuchen.
And did they pull the sidewalls in as well?
They slashed everything.
They slash it, they pull it in, it's clean fill.
And then they just dumped clean fill. There was a lot of crap in it.
Right. Well, I knew someone had that done on St. James up in Borough, they did the same thing, they came in, they broke the,
But the sides of the pools were not being supported any longer, other
Right.
than with the dirt pushing against the dirt that existed. So if that's any help, it worked for years.
areas where you need a little bit of shade for anything that was going on, for, you'd have that area still there where that vestibule used to be. Where the pump room was, the pump is still in there, so that has to be taken out, but there's a big, huge, imagine, a huge hole in there where this thing is sitting. Right now, there's equipment in there, lawn equipment that our maintenance guys are using, so it is a good building for that kind of stuff, like you're saying, as far as shovels and whatever else you're gonna put there, or anything else you decide with that area. But that's the reason we had to wait for testing to come back, you know, to make sure, yeah, all that stuff is okay before you would consider if you had to break that up and throw it into the pool. You don't want to be doing that, so that's the reason we waited, and to see if we were going to actually use those buildings. So what's the sense of knocking them down if you can then just maybe get some money to refurbish them and provide another bathroom down there? So that's the reason it's sitting, you know. And the concession stand was actually in really good condition. That would need very little for that to be able to utilize that in some way. So why take them down if we could just put a roof on and a little bit more money and rebuild the whole thing, if it's possible.
And when this plan was developed, the idea was to preserve as much as possible down there and refurbish it, to make use. So what are we going to do with a big concrete slab and a garden? Well, let's put the garden in the middle and make it a showpiece. So
And keep in mind, audience, the fact is that the whole thing is already fenced in. That is really a major expense, as the dog park people would certainly attest to. Costs a lot of money. This is probably more fencing than you guys even bought. So that's like a major reusage of something we already have, and something that we would have difficulty ever coming up with the money for a community garden if we didn't have that opportunity. But I think also what's impressed me most about it is the opportunity for people who aren't even leasing a garden for that year. And Wayne's cost for leasing is very nominal. He's thinking maybe $50 a year for a bed. Just about anybody could afford it, even for their kid or grandchild, just to start learning a little bit about gardening. Or you can do a great garden there too. But the opportunity to go down and hear from master gardeners, a 1 hour or half-hour lecture or something, free, that's just awesome. You don't find that many places. We never had it here in Morrisville. I think it's great.
that $50 target, that was, as an example, you know, money can be shaved, but the idea would be a first-time leaser or a first-time lessee would pay the $50, some portion of that $50, sort of like an initiation fee to cover the construction cost of the bed, you know. The next year, you have first choice at that bed again, you know, or to move if there's a vacant bed. And it's there's no initiation fee, so now the fee is down to, and I don't know what it, you know, exactly it would work out to be, but you know, maybe $40 or $30, something like that. It would be less money the second, third, fourth year. So that would encourage people to continue coming back.
Suggestion for your buying, so to speak, make it a bond. So there's a more vested interest that if you do pull out or you collect in the street, something to move, not a big one, but maybe like a $7 bond that you can put into an escrow account, and a little bit of that, you know, interest, not a lot, to do more maintenance and upkeep on the bond. It's $50, they don't show up for a few weeks and go to check. But if it's something you can get back, if you maintain and show up, and if you do put it in 3 years' time, then you can, the bond goes back to it. You give them a tighter bond, but it gives you a little nest egg, so to speak, to have them reserved and get some interest going on it. And the longer you're a member, your bond stays there, and it can just accrue percentage year after year after year. If it does end up being a 15-year proposition and longer down there, it's something that if you buy in, you get a little something, not a lot, but it can compound into something over time.
Excuse me,
That's-
Kurt. That was addressed at the last meeting. He explained when you had certain criteria that you had to.
Yeah, that's the
If you
first
didn't
time I've
meet your
heard.
kit, you're done.
Exactly, but
You're
if
done.
there's a bond tied to it too, it'll give people more of a, I don't want to lose more money by not doing it. And plus it gives them that little bit of a seed capital, so to speak, that you year of tax, interest on it can build up over time, and
I understand what you're coming from, I do. I think we also wanted to make it as least complicated as possible at the beginning.
Yeah, it's the first time I've heard a suggestion framed that way. In most cases, they, to attend a 4x8 garden, is two, if we get a lot of rain and a lot of sun, 4 hours a week. If you start allowing your bed to go fallow, you get a warning, a phone call, hey, you gotta come down, if you're sick, this is a community, so somebody else can, weed and, that kind of thing. But if you don't respond, and then you don't respond to the second time, you forfeit it. And we're not gonna let that, we don't wanna let that space go fallow. We want to tend it and dedicate whatever's growing in there to the food bank. So I understand the incentive, and I'll add that also to the list of considerations.
And do you have any scholarship or grants for people who really would have a hard time, who would benefit by having food? Like, could you have some sponsors for people who really can't come up with the initial fees?
In the plan, I suggested that nobody be turned away. That a garden of this size requires a significant amount of effort, and that there are more than enough opportunities for people to volunteer to attend to the dedicated gardens for the food bank. There's grass clipping, there's trimming of the native plants, and things like that. So there's plenty of upkeep and other maintenance issues around in the garden space that I think would pretty much fill a summer for anybody who, if they couldn't afford the fee for the lease, they could certainly provide that in kind of work.
The audience might be wondering about how you're going to run it, board of directors and.
What I suggested was that council appoint some sort of a committee to get this thing started. The instructions and the guide, the how to get this thing up and running, it's all been done before, it's all been tested. So all they really have to do is just kind of follow this. I would suggest that going into the first season, a parallel group be voted in by the leasing members, so that there's direct input from gardeners, as well as the people who are appointed by council. And that together, they can pursue grants. They might want to consider the formation of a 501c3, so they can receive donations from outside. There's several kind of opportunities to branch out and make that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you had said about a board of directors or something.
Yeah, there'd be some sort of leadership there that would, ultimately be responsible for managing this site. And my experience talking with several other community gardens, they seem to be kind of a real cooperative nature. That they put up a task list of things that need to be done, and people step up and do it. That people who participate in these things take a lot of pride in the space. It's a park. It's not just a vegetable garden.
Could you tell me, have you ever seen North Falls Community Garden?
I don't
No.
think
I
so.
was going to ask if you could compare what they have to what the vision is here.
I've seen the one up by the Pond of Reflection in Lower Makefield. I've seen the one in Yardley Township. I've seen the one in, this is on Trenton Road down by, there's like a senior center in the next community down there, I forget, near the technical high school, down below that. They have a community garden. And those are run mostly as, row crop kind of spaces, In Trenton, there's an organization that's an amazing organization that really does a lot of work with the community of Trenton called ISLES, Incorporated, ISLES. And they're a nonprofit, and they seed these community gardens. We've been invited to join them if this plan gets approved. They can help starter plants at discount rates, and